that after.
Okay.
Rosalie, do you have a black marker Good morning, everyone. Was a principality. Was. Okay. Good morning. Boker Tov. So this morning we're going to go to the Balkans, meaning the area around the Black Sea. And so you'll see on the map kind of where we are situated in the world. By the way, before I start, I want to thank those of you who came to the opera on Sunday. I really appreciate the support. It was wonderful to see you there. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So we're going to talk about the Jews of Romania. And so you'll recall that in a much earlier class, when we were in the G's, we're in the R's now. When we were in the G's, we spoke about Romaniot Jews. Romaniot Jews, R-O-M-A-N-I-O-T-E, Romaniot. The Romaniot Jews are not the same as Romanian Jews. Romaniot Jews were the Greek Jews, and it's the oldest Jewish population in Europe, are the Romaniot Greek Jews. You'll recall from our discussion that the Greek Jews in general were almost completely wiped out during the Holocaust. It was one of the really they're all horrible, but that was a really tragic. They're all tragic. That was a really horrible thing. Almost the entire Greek population of Jews went, and it had been a very strong population. Morning. So, Romanian Jews are not Romaniot Jews. Okay. So there has been a presence of Jews in Romania since about the 2nd century. 2nd century meaning what years? The 100s. Remember, so when we're talking about CE, we're talking about the years before that. So the 3rd century is the 200s, the 4th century is the 300s, etc. So since the 100s and the Roman Empire, okay, that's not surprising. A lot of Jews went to a lot of places after the Romans took over Judea, right? So after the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE, recall that after destruction of the First Temple in 586, Jews began moving out to places. After the destruction of the Second Temple as well, there were a number of Jews who were taken into captivity into Rome, many as slaves. And there are reports that the Jewish labor was used extensively to help build the Colosseum. But we know this specifically from the frieze, F-R-I-E-Z, the sculpture on the top of Titus's arch. Remember, that one shows the Jews, and they're carrying the big menorah from the temple. And so that is the taking of the slaves into Rome. Okay, so there is a presence of Jews starting in the 2nd century, and that shouldn't surprise us at all. Jews were moving all over the world at that time. They began to. As an aside, remember that the rabbis instituted 2 incredible innovations into Judaism. And I say this because, we can criticize the rabbis for some things. For instance, they have an extensive writings on how women's bodies should be regulated and what women should do and what they may and may not, et cetera, et cetera. And so looking at this from a 2024 lens, I can say, well, you know, women should, in my opinion, should have the right to determine what happens to themselves. However, that's not a traditional Jewish view at all. Now, having said that, so the rabbis instituted two specific reforms. The first one is they changed Judaism from a sacrificial cult and they made it prayer, study, and acts of kindness, which is what Judaism is today. What did that do? It made Judaism portable. Before the destruction of the temple, the only place where people could practice Judaism, and remember, Judaism, ISM, is a Greek ending that means the way of. So Judaism is the way of the Judeans, how the Judeans lived. And how did they live? They brought sacrifices to the temple and hoped that God would like the sacrifices. Well, that became impossible after 70 CE. There was no more temple. So what the rabbis did was they made Judaism portable for every human being. They could, wherever they were, they could practice Judaism. The second super important innovation is that they made Judaism the personal responsibility of each individual. Why was that significant? Because before the temple was destroyed, who had the responsibility for mediating your Judaism? It was the priests. You had to go through a priest to get to God. And we see that still in the Catholic Church right this minute. If you want forgiveness from God, you have to go to the priest and ask forgiveness, and then the priest mediates your absolution by God. The rabbis eliminated that because the priesthood didn't have a job anymore, right? And there was no temple. And so the rabbi said, each of you can access God. You don't have to go through the priests anymore. Those were two hugely, hugely important innovations by the rabbis that kept us going. The rabbis were brilliant men, and if we didn't have them, we wouldn't be here today. They saved us. They absolutely saved Judaism and kept us on the map. Okay. We know that there were communities of Karaites in southern Ukraine, in Crimea, which we all hear about in the news today, and there were reported Karaite communities, meaning there was a Jewish presence along the Black Sea. Someone remind me who the Karaites are? That's important. This is an important name for us to know.
As far as I can remember, the Karaites are very literal in terms of the execution of the religion, as opposed to us who are really rabbinical. They were literal.
Okay, very good, very good. That's correct. In the sense that our Judaism today, all of us in this room, Rabbinic Judaism recognizes a written Torah, which you read from, the 5 books of Moses, and then our Bible, the rest of the writings, and they recognize an oral Torah, which is the Talmud, basically, Talmud and Midrash. And we, in this room, follow what the Talmud says. We don't follow what the Torah says. We follow what the Talmud says. Why? Because the Talmud are the rabbis telling us what the Torah means. So God tells Moses, you need to shecht, you need to slaughter the animal like this. That's the words in the Torah. Slaughter it like this. And that's all we get. Like what? Like what? There's no information there. So the rabbis come in and save us. And the rabbis say, well, when God said slaughter it like this, what he meant was, and then the rules of shechting come about. Who know? Okay, good. So the question is, how did the rabbis know? It was possibly already a custom, but what the rabbis did was they looked through our tradition to understand what God would have meant when he said that. They guessed, but they were incredibly educated guesses. I mean, they were thoroughly researched, and they were an opinion. They were the rabbis' opinions based on all the other aspects of our tradition.
And
Interpretation, yes. So this is exactly like what the Supreme Court does for us. We have the Constitution. Say again? Don't get me started. Don't get me started. I'm angry at all of them. It all depends on what side of the fence you're on, but I'm angry with every single one of them for various reasons. Anyway, so the Supreme Court tells us what the Constitution says. We don't follow the Constitution. We follow what the Supreme Court tells us it says. We don't follow the Torah. We follow what the rabbis tell us the Torah says in the Talmud. That's what Rabbinic Judaism is. The Karaites reject the oral Torah. They reject the opinions of the rabbis. They say the written word is the written word and that's it. And we do not accept the rabbis' interpretations of what the written word means. So, what that does for us is it establishes two groups, along with the Samaritans in the north, two groups of fundamentalist Jews. Judaism does not have fundamentalist Jews, except for the Karaites and the Samaritans. Are there? Absolutely. There's huge numbers of them, and many of them live in Israel. They are considered Jews for the law of return. Absolutely. Many Karaite communities still exist. So these, yes, go ahead. I think they do their own interpretation. Yes. They do not adhere to rabbinic principles at all. I know that they do. Oh, where do they sacrifice? The temple's gone. You know, I'll have to do a little more research into that. I don't know, but I know the Samaritans make a Passover sacrifice at their ritual place on Mount Gerizim in the north. So the Karaite community was founded by Anan ben David in around 800 CE. Around 800. And we know that the father of Jewish philosophy, Saadia Gaon, shortly thereafter, criticizes and he polemicizes. He argues against the Karaites. Okay. The earliest recorded Jewish community is in the 1550s. That's the first written records of Jewish communities. But the 1300s, 200 years before, Romania had already started to become a refuge for Jews who were kicked out of Hungary and Poland. What was happening in the 1300s that Jews might have been kicked out of Hungary and Poland? 1300, something really horrible. Black Plague, very good. The bubonic plague hits Europe and just wipes out huge populations, about a third of the population of Europe. And the Christians blamed the Jews. Why? Partly because Jewish families and Jews were dying at a slower rate than Christians. Why was that? Because of cleanliness. Right, because of hygiene and cleanliness. Remember, bubonic plague is spread by fleas on rats. And so if you don't have the rats in your house because you keep a very clean house, then you don't have the fleas and you're not exposed to the bubonic plague, et cetera, et cetera. So the Christians, however, saw the Jews dying at a slower rate and said, oh, they must be the ones who are responsible for it. They're poisoning wells. I mean, it was a mass panic. And we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I think for us, the closest parallel for us is the day or 2 or 3 or 4 after COVID hit, when we all ran to the supermarkets and we were all trying to buy whatever food we could get, when we just stay away from everybody, don't touch anybody, use plastic. I mean, we had no idea what was going on, and we were frightened, right? And so in those days, the Christians blamed the Jews. There were definitely some attempts in our country to blame Asians, right? There were a number of attacks on Asians. And so it's sort of human nature. You kind of go after who you think might have started it. Okay. So by the 1390s, Jews in Romania were exempted from military service in exchange for paying a small tax. Now, how does that sound familiar to us? Demi, very good. Oh, I love it when you guys are getting so smart. I love it. I love it. So, the answer was demies. So, what's going to happen in the 1500s under the Ottomans, out of the Ottoman Turkish Empire, is that Jews are going to be classified as demies, basic protected people, but what amounts to sort of second-class citizens. We weren't persecuted to a great degree, but we just had to keep our mouths shut, keep our heads low, keep quiet, and then they kind of left us alone. Yeah, deference to the majority population. And as demies, we had to pay a special tax. And that tax was called the jizya. And the jizya was a tax for not serving in the military. But we were prohibited from serving in the military. So recall, we had to pay a tax for something we weren't allowed to do. Okay, that's just how it is. So we were exempted in the 1390s from military service in exchange for paying a small tax. Under the 1500s, under the Ottomans, there is some persecution in the 2 areas before Romania became Romania. There was the Principality of Moldavia, which ultimately becomes Moldova in modern times, as well as the Principality of Wallachia in the south. Bucharest, the capital, is in Wallachia. And that's important because there are different kind of situations for Jews at various points in history in those two areas. Under the Ottomans, Moldavia and Wallachia are deprived. They deprived Jewish merchants of their rights, and they, mostly under the guise of saying that they committed tax fraud. So the Jews and the Jewish merchants of the two principalities were persecuted against and prevented from engaging in trade. In 1648, this is another date that should go bing, 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 bing. 1648, something terrible happens. Any ideas? So 1640, true. These are the Khmelnytsky massacres in Poland. There is a pogrom against Jews by the Cossacks that resulted in the deaths of thousands of Jews. And the Jews fled. Many Jews fled that area because of the pogroms following the Khmelnytsky massacres. And where did they flee to? They fled to Moldavia and Wallachia from Poland. So there was an increase in the Jewish populations of what is today Romania, clearly, because you had Jews leaving Poland to get there. Now we start a period of terrible persecutions and massacres. The first blood libel case is made on April 5th, 1710. Tell me again about blood libel. Good. They took Jewish children's blood for the matzahs. Look how smart you're getting, Lois. They took Jewish children's blood for the matzahs. Non-Jewish. They Christian. Yes. Thank you. I thought I heard non-Jewish. It's okay. It's fine. It's fine. You were on the right track. So Jews were accused of murdering a Christian child once a year around Easter time and using the child's blood to make matzah for Passover. And we've talked about it a number of times. It's just so preposterous because the one food we can't eat is blood. The most important food we can't eat is blood. So anyway. And the instigator of this first claim of blood libel was a Jew who had been baptized, so a convert. And it resulted in the murder of 5 Jews. Many, many houses were pillaged. Many Jews were tortured. Blood libel came up again in 1714 in the city of Roman. 2 Jews were hanged. Houses were plundered. This one involved a Christian girl, who was working in one of the Jewish houses. Then in 1726, a young boy, Jews accused of killing a 5-year-old boy on Easter of that year. Between 1768 and 1794, we have the first Russo-Turkish War between Russia and Turkey. And the Jews in Romania were caught in the middle, and they endured hardships, they endured massacres, pillaging. Jewish children were scooped up and forcibly baptized. There were large mob attacks. There were some Jews who ran to the synagogues for safety, but they burned the synagogue and burned them. And some were thrown into the Danube and weren't able to swim, and so they drowned. Between 1806 and 1812, we had the Second Russo-Turkish War, and again, many more massacres of Jews. So there's an estimate that in 1825 there were approximately 5,000 to 10,000 Jews, Sephardic Jews, living in Bucharest, which you'll see is in the southern Principality of Wallachia.
There's also quite a few Jews in other towns and municipalities throughout Romania.
Correct. there are quite a few Jews who are living in other towns and, and municipalities throughout Russia, throughout Romania. But the largest concentration of Jews, for sure, was Bucharest in the capital. Have you been to Romania?
We're going this summer, and I'm reading a book on Romania now.
Excellent, excellent. Gary says they're going this summer and they're reading a book on Romania right now. By 1839, the population of Jews was estimated to be 7,000. And by 1848, there were 11,000. So Jews were steadily moving into Romania. In 1821, we had the Greek War of Independence. And during the Greek War of Independence, there were more pogroms, there were more persecutions, and Jewish communities suffered terribly, terribly. By 1829, we had the Treaty of Adrianople, which ended the Greek War of Independence, and after which many, many Jews moved to, Ashkenazi Jews, moved to Moldavia, in the northern part of what is today Romania and what is today the the country of Moldova. What I should have said is what was then the northern municipality of Moldavia and what is today the country of Moldova. And these were Jews who were being persecuted by Russia. Another date, 1829, which we're just talking about. So what's going on in the 1800s? Why are Jews leaving Russia? What's 1800? Not so much pogroms yet. Napoleon in Western Europe. Who's in charge of Russia? Just after Catherine the Great. Just after Catherine the Great. And what did Catherine the Great do? If we think 1800, we think Catherine the Great. Pale of Settlement, right? This is Fiddler on the Roof time. So what Catherine the Great did was she annexed territory in Eastern Europe and made it part of Western Russia. Parts of Poland and south of Poland. She annexed that into Russia. When she did that, she brought in thousands and thousands of Jews because they were living in that area, in Poland and Eastern Europe. However, her decree was no Jews may live in Russia proper. So she designated that area that she annexed on the west end of Russia to be called the Pale of Settlement. And that's where Jews, as well as others, lived. It wasn't only Jews who lived there. There were lots of other people who lived there as well. They invaded and took it. The question was, how did she annex it? Yeah, the Russian army went in and took it. Yes.
The question is, around that time, isn't that when Belarus gained the Jews? You know, Belarus is north of Poland, and
I don't know.
because I think that was also part of the Pale of Settlement, Belarus.
Yes. I think we talked about this at one point. Part of Belarus, of what is today Belarus, was part of the Pale of Settlement. Yes. Why do they call it Pale of Settlement? Pale in this sense means area of settlement. Where is Poland on our map? Somewhere here. Sure. It's a good question. And so, so the Pale of Settlement is established in 1791 during Catherine the Great's reign. When is the Pale of Settlement out of existence? When does it leave existence? World War I, very good. Why?
It was a guess.
1917 during World War I. Why? Because the armies went through the Pale of Settlement and flattened it. And so that was the end of the Pale of Settlement as the armies moved through World War I. It was a good guess, absolutely. By 1838, estimates 80,000 Jews in Romania. 80. Oh, 1838. 1838. And by 1859, the population had increased, Jewish population had increased to about 160,000, doubled. And it was 12% of the Romanian population at that time. Between 1859 and 1866, the territories, the principalities of Moldavia and Wallachia are united to form Romania, what is now the present country of Romania. In 1859, another blood libel case on Easter, and throughout the 1860s and 70s, Jews were barred from practicing law. In 1866, the Bucharest synagogue was desecrated and then demolished. They rebuilt it later on, but at that time it was desecrated and demolished. Jews were beaten, tortured, robbed, and the Constitution was amended to say that only Christians could be citizens. Why was that important? Because Napoleon had allowed citizenship much earlier. Now, remember that every country that, after Napoleon retreats, they rescind rights of citizenship. In the early 1900s, this is kind of neat, Romania became the center for Yiddish theater. And Romania still, up until this minute in history, has a Yiddish theater program, and it's the longest running, continuous running Yiddish theater. That's a nice thing. In 1878, we have the Russian victory over the Ottoman Empire and the Treaty of Berlin. And then we have 1881. 1881 should go ding, 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 ding. What's 1881? Pogrom, because of the assassination of Tsar Alexander II. Tsar Alexander II is assassinated. It's blamed on Jews. Jews didn't do it, but it was blamed on Jews. And that started a wave of immigration from Eastern Europe, both to Palestine, to the United States, as well as other areas of Europe. And then in 1905, ding, 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 Kishinev pogrom. And the Kishinev pogrom, over 70,000 Jews fled. What would you like me to write down? The name Kishinev or, yes? Okay. Will somebody look that up for me? I think. Where is Kishinev? I think it's Russia, but let's find out. So, late 1800s, early 1900s, lots of instability in Russia. And of course, we know we have the Russian Revolution in 1917. 17 is the big one. That's when Nicholas and Alexandra are deposed, provisional government's installed, Lenin comes in and creates a new government. Where is it? What does Ken say? What is the answer? Was an then the capital of Bessarabia of the Russian Empire. Yes, thank you. That's going to come up in a minute. Bessarabia was a region in what was then the Russian Empire. That's going to come up in a second. Okay, hold on. Yeah, hold on. Cecil, go first.
Just a personal note. 1918, when the Russian front collapsed and the Russian soldiers ran because they got their rear ends kicked, some rogue Russian soldiers ran through the area where my grandfather had his farm and kicked my grandmother, whose name I bear, to death because they were looking for jewels. They had no jewels there. The only thing that they left intact in my grandparents' house was a picture of the Tsar, because my grandfather was a minor tax collector, so he had a picture of the Tsar. They destroyed everything in the house, kicked my grandmother to death. My mother was a little girl, and when they took her, took my grandmother on the floor to kick her, my mother cried out, "Mama!" And they put a gun in her mouth. And they said, "Shut up, or we will blow your head." And my mother witnessed how they kicked her mother to death. Russian soldiers.
Just unimaginable. Ray? Your parents came from Moldova? Uh-huh. Yes. Very nice. Yes. So her father was able to escape conscription under Nicholas the First, not Nicholas and Alexandra, Nicholas the First, who conscripted the boys into the army for 25 years and indoctrinated them in Eastern Orthodox Christianity, so that when they eventually came out, they had no connection to Judaism whatsoever.
I'm so interested in hearing about Romania because my father was born there, but he would never, ever speak about... Oh, okay. Shall I start all over? Okay, I said I'm very interested in hearing about Romania because my father was born there. He said he was born in 1905. He would never talk about his experiences there except for, I know he left the country and came to the United States also to escape the Russian army that he would have been eligible for. I think he came to the United States and he went straight to Chicago in, I think it was 1926. And the only other thing he ever spoke about was when he was a little boy and his father was a peddler and there were pogroms going on. And some, I'll just call them ruffians, I don't know what to call them, murderers, stopped his father in the, peddler van that he, what do you call it, little cart that he was driving, and beat his father up, and my father, you know, was scrunched down in fear, watching the whole thing, and he was helpless to do anything. And and then the third thing he said was that he lived somewhere near Bucharest, and I have no idea what village he lived in, and I'd really like to know. I'd like to maybe visit there someday. So.
Very nice. Very nice. Thank you. Where's Hungary, everyone? Here.
Hungary's right to the north of, west of, Romania.
Yes, that's what I said, right here. That's Hungary. Okay, so during by 1900, there were 250,000 Romanian Jews. A lot. And they constituted 3.3% of the total population of Romania. During World War I, apparently there are 882. I don't know how they got to be so precise with their numbers, but 882 Jewish soldiers fought in World War I. They were Romanian Jews, and they died. In 1919, the Paris Peace Conference, Romania was part of the Paris Peace Conference, and they agreed to establish citizenship for Jews, for Jews to get their minority rights, and so they were emancipated. Jews in Romania were emancipated, just like Jews of France had been in 1800. So this is 1919. During the interwar period, the time between World War I and World War II, thousands of Jews from then USSR went to Romania. So, 1922, what are we thinking about in Russia? What in the USSR? What's going on in the USSR and Jews? Communism, right? And a very inhospitable place for Jews. Anti-Semitic attacks. The communist USSR was basically a secular entity. And so, that's right. So Jews couldn't practice Judaism. So thousands of Jews moved from the USSR to Romania. There was a Reform Jewish community in Transylvania, which is right in the center of Romania. Dracula land. But it's right in the center of the country of Romania. And it's pretty much Orthodox everywhere else. And in the northern territory of Bessarabia, which we had just mentioned in terms of Russian, there was a pretty large population that embraced socialist labor Zionism. So remember, we're talking now about the early 1900s, right? And in the early 1900s, Theodor Herzl had already put forward a vision for a Jewish state. Zionism was a nascent movement. The Aliyot had already begun to Palestine, of Jews leaving Eastern Europe to go to Palestine to build up a Jewish homeland. And as we've talked about a number of times, that was the beginning of real problems with the Muslim Arab population, because they were the majority population. These new Jews from Eastern Europe were not behaving like dhimmis, and that made the Arab population very, very upset. Plus, these new Jews were buying up land from the Arabs, purchasing land. So that was the beginning of tensions, which is going to erupt in 1920 in the Jerusalem riots and the Grand Mufti. Did you want to say something, Alana? Bessarabia is the current country of Moldova. And so there was a socialist Zionism movement there. And we should talk about that for a second. We're going outside what we're doing, but it's important. Socialist Zionism, as opposed to political Zionism, as opposed to religious Zionism, what were the differences? Well, I mean, we know what Zionism is, right? The movement for a Jewish homeland. All right. So if we're talking about socialist labor Zionism, what are we talking about in Israel right now? The kibbutzim? Yes. There are religious kibbutzim. But essentially, it's the labor movement, the collective movement where everybody works together for the good of everybody. Okay? Political Zionism. That was Theodor Herzl's vision. We want a country of our own. And he wanted a political entity of a country as its own. Religious Zionism. Biggest proponent was Rav Kook. And this was the establishment of a country based on the Jewish religion. And, you know, the idea of Israel being founded on religious principles, that this was going to be a religious state. We also see this as somewhat of a problem in our ultra-Orthodox community in Israel today. Part of the reason why they don't want to serve in the military, is because they don't see Israel as a legitimate state. Why don't they see Israel as a legitimate state? Because Mashiach hasn't brought it about. There is a passage in the Talmud especially that indicates and interprets that it will only, that God has to bring this about. And in the case of Israel, the UN brought it about, starting with the 47 partition plan, right? So it is not seen as a legitimate state, even though this community receives stipends and monies and services from the state. It's a very thorny situation. The modern Orthodox, the ultra-Orthodox, modern Orthodox, a number of modern Orthodox are now serving in the Israeli military.
Yes, those are the ones that volunteer, correct. However, there is a considerable number of the ultra-Orthodox. There is a considerable number of the ultra-Orthodox that, in some other words, I'd rather die than serve in the IDF. And there is about 66,000 male ultra-Orthodox of military age that do not serve in the IDF. And it's a cause of problem.
And so Gary was talking about modern Orthodox Jews. That's a different situation from ultra-Orthodox, but Ziesel's right about ultra-Orthodox. And even just, I think it was 2 weeks ago, one of the chief rabbis there in the ultra-Orthodox community said, look, if you enact this new law, because it was passed already, it just hasn't been enacted, then the ultra-Orthodox are going to leave. And a lot of the Israeli sentiment is, good, don't let the door hit you on the way out. Because you don't want to, you want to take stipends, you want to take services from the country, but you don't want to fight for it? It's... Say again?
Chabad has always recognized the state of Israel.
Chabad. Okay, what last comment for Zisel? Then I got to let you go, or you won't have a break. We're going to absolutely finish Romania next week.
Rabbi Joseph, who's the main Sephardi rabbi, made a statement that he'd rather leave Israel than have his people serve.
Yeah, that is exactly what I was just talking about. That I don't know, but it's I mean it's a very difficult position to maintain. You want to take everything from the country, but you aren't willing to fight for it. Okay, everyone, have a beautiful week. So nice to see you all again. I'll see you next week, and we'll finish Romania next week.
I have a very important announcement, actually two. The first one is today's soup is broccoli soup in the cafe. But the second announcement is regarding the Braid, which was Jewish Women's Theater. A week from today, here at Adat Ariel, they are doing their second show of the year called Yearning to Breathe Free. About immigration, how perfect is that here today? Today's Jewish immigrant stories of inspiration, resilience, and finding home. And another thing about it is, in these amusing and profound contemporary stories, see America through fresh eyes. Experience the drama of leaving one's country and finding a home in a new one. On a personal note, I have been attending Jewish Women's Theater since it began about 15 years ago. The shows are fantastic. And Susie Wozniak, who has a relative who works there for Jewish Women, for the Braid now, said, this is the best one yet. So I would encourage you to go on the Adat Ariel website and make arrangements to go a week from tonight. I will be seeing it tonight, actually, because I have season tickets. I'll see it at BBS tonight. And I plan to send something out to everyone, just to tell you how much I enjoyed it. But I mean, that's just a preview of my email. Anyway, please think about coming. It's a wonderful organization, and they do wonderful work. Enjoy the break.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Janice, you okay? You good? So, everyone, we're going to start in just a second. Before we begin, I just wanted to introduce Chana Blugrind, who is going to be our new ECC director here. So, the director of the Early Childhood Center at Adat Ariel. And so she... Yeah, that's right. So actually, it's interesting you should mention that, Ken, because one program... Actually, Hannah, you want to tell them about your dream about the Sages and Sprouts? And just say hello?
I would love to, yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Hannah. It's lovely to meet you. And I have to tell you, one of my professors in the doctorate program, I'm pursuing a doctorate right now, is Dr. Powell. I think probably many of you are familiar with Dr. Powell. And he spoke so warmly about the community and was very excited for me to join. So first of all, I want to thank you for building such a beautiful community that I get to be a part of and hopefully bring all of my kids and my partner into as well. So thank you for that. And one of the programs that I'm really excited about adding here to Adat Ariel is Sages and Sprouts. So sprouts are those little people running around down here that you, the sages, have a lot to share with and teach about what the world is like and how it came to be. So I'm hoping together with Rabbi Schuldenfrei and everybody else to build a beautiful program where you'll be able to come in and spend time in the ECC with the little kids and read them stories and tell them your stories. So this is one of the things that that I'm very excited about starting. So I hope to get to know all of you a lot. Yeah, the little sprouts, right? And the sages water them. That's where it comes from. Thank you. Thank you.
So we just, I think that's such a lovely idea that Hannah has about, you know, we're 50 yards away from just a very different demographic, and there's no reason that these two communities can't enjoy one another and bring each other nachas, right, and bring each other joy and love. And so I was really, we're really just grateful to Hannah. This is literally her first day here. So she doesn't know where to park. So you could sell her a parking spot, or she doesn't know. That's right, exactly. And she doesn't, you know, so you could, you know, just so just be kind and welcoming. But it's as we always are. But it's a pleasure to have Hannah here, and she's got like a list of 10 meetings that she's running to. Do you know how to get there?
I think so.
Okay. All right. If Helen, if you see Hannah wandering around, just like yell, and we'll. Okay. All right. Bye bye. So Hannah's originally from Denmark, and she's lived here. She's lived in Israel. She's a passionate Zionist and a passionate Jewish educator, and we really feel very blessed to have her. So we'll introduce more of that. She, you know, being that she doesn't even know where she's parking her car yet, we'll give her a chance before we, you know, tell her, you know, Sages and Sprouts may, you know, we'll let her grow some roots first, and then we'll do the Sages and Sprouts program. Anyway, we're going to continue where we left off last session. How is everyone doing today? Good. Baruch Hashem. So I want to just remind everybody that Purim is coming up. And so Purim here is on, well, Purim here and everywhere except in a walled city from the time of Joshua ben Nun, which then it's the day later. But Purim is this Saturday evening. And we're going to begin things. You've all gotten emails about Purim, and we're reading Megillah. There's a talent show, and so it should be a lot of fun. And if Purim isn't exactly your thing any longer, or, you know, I understand, I also want to remind everyone that on April 2nd, Tuesday night, April 2nd, I'm doing that's your birthday? Is that? Really? We are doing, we're doing a book club. Ken got to choose the book. That's a lie. I just made that up. but it's the book is called. So I've started a new series. I did it once before. A few of you were present. Oh, I'm building up to it, Eileen. The book is called, and then dun 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 dun, and you're wondering, but now I'm talking, and you're still wondering. So anyway, the idea is that every few months I'll do a book that I've read recently that I think is relevant to what we're experiencing in the Jewish community, or something I just found interesting. The first book that we did was a book called The War of Return. It was a book that examined the failure of the peace process in Israel and tried to understand and dissect the underlying issue between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And the name kind of gives it away, The War of Return. So that was the first book. And then coming up on April 2nd, in honor of Ken's birthday, we are going, this is going to be a little bit of a downer subject, anti-Semitism, here and now. Sorry. If I know it was your birthday, I would have been like, Judaism, a great spiritual path, but instead anti-Semitism. So this is a book by Ambassador Deborah Lipstadt, and it is a book, it came out, I think she wrote it like it was in 2018 or 2019, in response to the uptick in anti-Semitism that she witnessed in America. And of course, Rabbi Lipstadt, Ambassador Lipstadt, she serves as the ambassador on anti-Semitism to the president, and she is also a professor of the Holocaust at Emory University, and she is the one who took on David Irving those years ago and won. And there was a book about her. There was a book about it, and there was a Hollywood movie that came out about it, right? So anyway, Deborah Lipstadt's book, Anti-Semitism Here and Now, with Ken's birthday on April 2nd, and it's at 5 o'clock. What's that? Sure. I confess, it's an odd book. I'll spend a few minutes on it. Why not? Yes. Oh yeah, she used to come here. Yeah. Oh, you've known her? So, yeah. Oh wow, that's great. Yeah. I'm not sure. Yeah. So Ray was just mentioning that Deborah Lipstadt used to come here when Ray was in charge of some of the activities, and she used to come here and speak often. So we'll read her book. It's a quick read, and for this Reading with the Rabbi series, you don't have to read in advance. If you want to, you certainly are welcome to. But the way it's organized is almost like a book talk on the radio, where I'll kind of explain what's going on with the book, and maybe we'll read some excerpts and talk about it. But it's more like I want you to be inspired to read the book after you leave, That's really the goal of it. So everyone is welcome. It's 5 o'clock on April 2nd, and you should all get that in your synagogue emails. Okay, that is the update. Oh, and then also I'll just another brief update. If Purim is here, that means the Passover, the Pesach, is around the corner. So. That's right. Yeah, she's an ambassador, actually. Right. She's the ambassador to the president on anti-Semitism, which is that position is now an ambassador. Well, in some ways it's good because that means that at least the government is recognizing it, but unfortunately it means it's a real issue. But yes, so she's thank you, Ray. Anyway, Passover is coming. There are here at Adat Ariel, we're hosting 2 Passover Seders. The first night is a community Seder. So if you don't want a pachker and don't want to worry and fuss about Pesach dinner, then you can come here, and it's one of those. You pay a certain amount, and then everything is with it. And then the second night, I'm running a Jammies and Jeans Seder, which is a Seder for the smallest members of our community, the preschoolers. And the kids run around, and I dress up as Moses with a beard, and we have like a lot of fun with all the little kids. So those are 2 Seders. You're welcome to come to Jammies and Jeans. My guess is that someone thought I was joking. What's the menu? It's hot dogs and hamburgers and tater tots, because it's for kids. Like, it's not. And someone said, "You're serving that on Pesach?" I was like, because that's what the kids want to eat. They don't want to eat like grilled chicken with asparagus. So if you're more of a grilled chicken and asparagus person, the first night of Pesach is good. And then also, just Berta, while you're here. We're trying to finalize the dates that Peter Levitan will also be giving some Passover workshops in preparation for the holiday. So all that information will be launched. Oh, you want, and also Sisterhood. Go ahead, Bridget. What do you say? And I'll. The Sisterhood pre-Passover dinner is led by Rabbi Alex. Not a dinner. What is it? It's on the 10th of April, and what is it? It's a pre-Passover event, and it's going to be led by obviously our Sisterhood and Rabbi Alexander and Cantor Dubin Aronoff. So it'll be a really nice evening. So that's April 10th, the pre-Passover workshops with Peter Levitan, the community Seder, the Jammies and Jeans Seder. You could sell your chametz through me. You just have to click a button. If you don't know how to do that, I'll bring a list maybe the next few classes. I'll bring a list, and I could, if you want me to sell your chametz for you. Okay. Any other questions before we finally dig into where we? Any other questions? Declarations, confessions. No little booth. We just we'll gossip about it. Okay. All right. So we are now ready to dig back into the Talmud. Now, put on your thinking hats and recall where we were situated before. Could someone tell me anything about what we were doing last week? And then I'll pass out the sheets and we'll resume our study. What were we talking about last week? You're like, last week? For breakfast. Was a long time ago. So you remember we were talking about we were studying a piece of Mishnah, okay? And Mishnah, if someone came up to you in Gelson's, no, don't shop at Gelson's, it's too expensive. If someone came to you at Trader Joe's, Whole Foods is it's like the only thing you could say that's worse than is Erdogan. I won't even go in that store. I'm like, there's nothing that oh yeah, a bottle of water for $7. Oh, no, thank you. Okay, so if you're at Trader Joe's and someone says to you, what's the Mishnah? What would you say? So it's actually interesting. It's not a commentary. It's not a commentary. Okay, interesting. It's not an interpretation. Okay, here. How about this? We're going to make a Mishnah. Hold on. So it occurs to me that I am an awful teacher because I've given you a historical context for what it is that we're learning, but not yet explained what it is that we are learning. Here's what I want you to do. It's the first rabbinical. Good, Susie, go ahead. Tell us. What is it? Whoops. Hold on, I gotta use the microphone or all the millions online.
The first rabbinical test.
Yeah. So it is the first collection of the teachings of the rabbis. Great. But what is it? So here's what this is what we're gonna do. Get together, just you don't have to get out of your chair. In in a group. Okay, this is what I want you to do. In a group of 2 or 3. In a group of 2 or 3, online, whoever's with you at home, a group of 2 or 3, and I want you to come up with 3 or 4 sentences. How do you I don't expect it to be comprehensive, but 3 or 4 sentences, so it's short. How do you bake a cake? Go ahead. Go talk to each other. Go 3 or 4 sentences. How do you bake a cake? Here, Susie, come over here. One more minute. If your cake isn't done, tough luck. Okay. One more minute. What groups did we have? Okay, this group here. Give me. This is what is. Give me. Who's your group representative? Okay, you're the group representative. Group representative. Your 3 or 4 sentences to how to bake a cake. Speak into that.
Okay. I won't say if we knew you were coming, I would have baked a cake. What? Turn it like this. All right. Oh, now you tell me after all these weeks. Okay. First, we would gather our ingredients of flour, sugar, eggs, baking soda, baking powder, a little oil. Right, okay. Next thing, we would mix all the ingredients well. We would grease our pan that we took out and put it in our oven at 350 degrees for 40, thank you, for 45 minutes. Excellent. Okay.
Excellent. Good. Give them a round of applause. All right, who's our next group? Susie's our next group. She organizes the whole thing, so she got to listen to her. Okay. Actually, none of you are going to cover it all. And that's part of the that's actually part of the deal. So actually, when someone is speaking, because I heard, Lois, when you were talking, someone said, "What about the frosting?" Good. Okay. It's okay. I didn't give you time. That's right. Because watch this. It's intentional. So I know it's not going to be comprehensive. When Susie's talking, think about what other things she could have included. Go.
Exactly what they said, except we sprayed the pan before we mixed the ingredients.
Okay, so the exact same thing, and which Lana could say, "Susie, what about the frosting?" And we're going to get there in just a second. Okay, good. Who's another group? Adrian, go ahead. Oh, come here. The microphone doesn't go as far. Well, then. Okay, go ahead.
So, we buy a Duncan Hines mix. It's a yellow cake mix. And then we take our pecans, chop them up, and toast them. And we add to our Duncan Hines mix eggs, oil, chocolate chips, sour cream, yes. And she ate my cake. And then after you bake it in the bundt pan for 45 minutes, you make this glaze with the pecans, and you put the glaze with powdered sugar and the pecans on top. And then you dye it so good.
And then you dye it so good. Those are the directions. Go to Duncan Hines, do all this pecan stuff, and then you dye because it's so good. Okay. Anyone else want to add something? Okay, Bridget. Oh, I'm sorry. Are you okay? Okay. Now, Janice, make sure that Bridget gets it completely right. Okay? All right, go ahead.
Well, we just had to add that you get the recipe first.
Okay, good.
We needed a recipe.
Okay. Melinda, I can't extend any further.
I just want to add, it's not like cooking. You have to measure your ingredients.
Okay, good. Anyone else? Ed, you have anything to add? Okay. So I actually have two ways of doing this that are much easier. Adrian, one is Eileen, you wanted to say something? Right, that was the easiest one. So my step to you was going to be buy Duncan Hines mix, follow the recipe, follow the directions. Done. The other one, and this is more like me, drive to Schwartz's Bakery, pick a cake, buy it, and go home. That would probably that's the Sheldon Fry way. Okay. Now, go ahead.
For me, who's always on a diet, wait till there's company to come to eat it, because I'm not going to do that.
Great. So let me now do a loose synthesis of all of these fine directions. Okay, I didn't forget. Okay. Would everyone agree that this is... Okay, now, are there... To bake a cake, gather ingredients, mix them together, bake in a greased pan for 45 minutes. Hold on. Hold on. Okay. Eileen says, what's the question? You had the answer. What's the question, Eileen, that you were asking, that you were asking before you answered? What temperature? Now watch. Notice I'm doing this in a different place. What temperature? Okay. Eileen says, how long did you say? 350 for a bundt cake. And what about another kind of cake? For bundt cake. And then who said, Lois, you said?
I said for any kind of cake, but we haven't answered what ingredients.
Hold on. For any cake. Does anyone disagree and says, Eileen, what are you talking about? 350? It's 375. Does anyone go up to 375? Okay. Now, who said what are the ingredients? Lois, good. And what? Eggs, flour, what else? Sugar, baking powder, soda, vanilla, chocolate. Yeah, okay. And rest depends on type of cake. Okay. We've just made a page of Talmud. Yes. The Masechet, or the tractate that we are studying, is called Cake. The Mishnah that we first began with is short instructions, not comprehensive, about how to accomplish what the task is. Gather the ingredients, mix them together, bake on a greased pan for 45 minutes. This is the... Hold on. That's not in the name. The budget's tight. This is the Mishnah. It is terse. It was originally written so that it could be memorized. There were actually people who walked around just memorizing it. And it's just not comprehensive, and it's quick, and it gives instructions or background or information. Like it begins, Me'etai korin et Shema ba'arvit. What time do you read the Shema? In the evening. Misha Kohen, then it gives then it tells you what to do. So here, to bake a cake, gather the ingredients, mix them together, bake in a greased pan for 45 minutes. The Gemara, don't necessarily turn the page. In fact, most of the time not. It bleeds right into one another in the Talmud. There is no in the Talmud, there is no lines here. Woo, whoop. It's all mushed together. And you just know the difference because there's just a letter that tells you that there's a new Mishnah or a new Talmud, but there's very few visual cues. There's no punctuation. Well, now modern Talmuds are coming out with more punctuation, and people like me who don't get to study as much as they want are very thankful for that, because in the Gemara, the conversation turns very quickly. And so they're looking at this. And the Gemara asks a question. What temperature should we bake it? And then Rabbi Eileen said 350 degrees for a bundt cake. Then the Gemara could ask a question. Is it only a bundt cake for 350 degrees? No. Rabbi Lois says 350 for any cake. By the way, everyone says Kule Alma, do not bake it at 375 unless your cake dries out. Then they can have more of a discussion. What kind of ways can you grease your pan? What is a pan? Should it be best if it's round silver glass? I'm out of my element here. I have no idea what's going on. Parchment paper. Someone says no parchment paper. Yes, parchment paper. Only use Italian parchment paper. Never use the parchment paper from this. And maybe you have a heated disagreement, you and Lois. Lois says no parchment paper and glass, and you say steel baking pans. That's the Talmud. Then all of a sudden, Lois and Lana are having this fierce discussion. Steel baking pans. Pyrex. I have no idea. Can you bake a cake in Pyrex? Okay, of course you can. Non-stick baking. Then the question arises, why do you grease it? Speaking of grease, does anyone know that grease is not healthy for you? Speaking of health, if we want to eat healthy, what should we eat? Did anyone talk about a Mediterranean diet? What's a Mediterranean diet? One that's high on fish. And by the way, speaking of fish, did anyone see Find Nemo? What happened in Nemo? Nemo and a friend, Dory, went. Dory was forgetful. By the way, we give out fish on Purim carnivals. What's a Purim carnival? It's a holiday, That's the Gemara. It's all over the place, and it goes quickly. There's a lot of disagreements. It's very rarely resolved. The Talmud is not a book of Jewish law. It's a book of Jewish discussion. Lois and Lana were having a fierce battle over what type of baking pan to use. 90% of the time, the Talmud is not going to indicate who wins that argument. You need either the Shulchan Aruch or the Rambam, Maimonides, to come in and make the ruling. I know, you're like Maimonides over there. So you're going to, that is the Mishnah, mostly not argumentative. Sometimes there's disagreements, but it's subject-oriented, it's tightly organized, it's terse, and it's not comprehensive. Then, this is kind of easy to study. You're just studying Mishnah. The Mishnah was codified around the year 200. You could study, if you come to my office, I'll show you, there's collections of Mishnah. But then the fun begins in the Gemara. In the Gemara, it's quick, it's back and forth, it's unresolved, it's passionate, there's arguments, like everyone's yelling at each other. That is the Gemara. Then on a typical page of Talmud, people, because this was written in the almost 2,000 years ago, terminology changes, cultural context changes, and you need help understanding what is going on. Rashi, the famous rabbi, writes a commentary that's job it is to clarify what's going on in the Talmud. Most often in terms of to clear on things like terms. So let's say, for instance, it says ingredients. We here today had a pretty, not universally, but we pretty much all agreed on what are the ingredients to the cake. But imagine there's 1,000 years from now. Right, they may not even know what that is. Right, so in 1,000 years ago, when you say the word ingredients, you're going to need someone to say, no, back then, this is what it meant. And so Rashi helps you understand both what's going on in the Mishnah and in the Gemara. So when you're studying Talmud, you are studying Mishnah, then Gemara, often with the assistance of Rashi. Now, what's interesting is there'll be a Mishnah, and then there'll be 20 pages of Gemara. Sometimes loosely connected, sometimes really firmly connected to the Mishnah, or sometimes I was talking about finding Nemo in Purim carnivals. That's how far away I got. And that is what happens in the actual Talmud. The Talmud is not anchored by subject. Not until the Rambam, till Maimonides comes along and says, by the way, folks, this is to go study the Talmud. It's all over the place. I'm going to organize everything by subject, and I'm just going to tell you what to do. Good and bad. I actually think bad. Well, good because it helps people, like at the end of the day, you want to how to bake a cake. So if someone comes to me and is like, Rabbi, I have a question. What do? I want to bake a cake. And I don't have time to study the back and forth between 350, bun cake 375, Pyrex, not Pyrex, grease pan, what do you do, this, I don't have time for that. And then the argument's unresolved. I am not going to pick a Talmud off of my shelf when someone says, what do you do, Rabbi? What I would do is I would pick off the Shulchan Aruch or the Mishnah Torah off of my shelf and look up. Those are legal works that are written by scholars, rabbinic scholars, that decide the law, essentially. But the Talmud itself is like a free-flowing discussion like the one that we had here. So today, we've learned what the Mishnah is. We've learned what the Gemara is. The Mishnah and the Gemara together is the Talmud. And you also learned the place of Rashi's commentary in Mishnah and Talmud study. Any questions? Yeah. It is fun and it is complicated because, if you want to study, if you want to study what to do, the Talmud is not what to do. But if you want to engage in something with intellectual rigor, and then what's interesting is then there's thousands of commentaries that would be written. Like if I kept on writing, there was this fierce debate between Lois and Lana over glass and metal. A fierce debate. And so there will be commentators that will try and understand, why did Lois want glass? Why did Lana want metal? Okay. So it could be what she has. So by the way, that's how some people describe the differences between Hillel and Shammai. That Shammai was part of the aristocratic class. And so when you look at Shammai, you see a perspective of an aristocrat. Someone who has class and has money and is looking at society with that lens, as opposed to Hillel, who is poor, who is a day laborer. And so maybe you can understand it through that lens. Or you can also understand it through Rabbi Akiva and his counterpart, Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Akiva was more of like a literalist, or at least believed that every word had a specific intention and is not wasted. And you remember all of the little designs on the crowns, they have intention and specific meaning. Remember that story that we read a few weeks ago? That's Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Ishmael said, are you crazy? It's like the bigger meaning. Don't get so focused. It's sort of like the debate on how you read law, American law, in terms of if you're a constructionist or not. And so Rabbi Ishmael says, you're reading this like way too literally. And you can look at bigger, broader strokes. And so that's another distinction in their theory. And you could break down legal theory on the Talmud. So you're right, the Talmud is not easy study. That's why this practice, how many of you have heard of Daf Yomi? Ed has heard of Daf Yomi, Susie's heard of Daf Yomi. Daf Yomi is the practice of studying one page of Talmud a day. If you studied one page of Talmud a day, it would take you 7 years to finish the whole Talmud. And I would say you're going too fast. Like, to study a page of Talmud, like, really can be hours and hours. I used to take classes, a whole semester would be like on 2 lines. So some people that's compelling and some people it's not. And there's different types of discussion in the Talmud. There's legal discussion, glass, metal, glass. Speaking of a Purim carnival, Dory the goldfish. Oh no, does the goldfish ever make it home from the Purim carnival? Do we ever want it? By the way, my kids once got a Purim goldfish and it was alive for 3 years and I was the only one who ever cleaned the water. It's just a story. And then the Talmud goes on. And then speaking of dirty water, the better way for you to get access to clean water is never to move to Flint, Michigan. Speaking of Flint, Michigan, does our government have a responsibility to do more as a society? That's the Talmud. It's all over the place. It's rarely definitive. And so that's the Talmud. Ken, you have a question? That's right. A lot of the Passover Haggadah and that discussion about how many plagues there were in Egypt, that's lifted from the Talmud. A lot of the passages from the Passover Haggadah are lifted from the Talmud. Who is the Arami Oved? Who is the wandering Aramean? So anyway, we don't have to get into Passover. I could actually, maybe I'll bring in a Passover. Maybe I'll bring in a Passover piece that I'll show you more of the Talmud. But now what we've done today, we've baked a cake. But what we've done, at least, is I hope given you a little bit more of an understanding of what the Talmud is. The Mishnah, the Gemara, Rashi, the different approaches to Talmud study, then later Jewish legal perspectives. And there are, by the way, 2 Talmuds. And that's what we were in the middle of studying. We studied a Mishnah from Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakana, that when he went into the Beit Midrash, he made a prayer. And when he left the Beit Midrash, he made another prayer. And that's what the Talmud tells us. And the question, now that you're Talmud experts, you know what exactly did he say? And that's a discussion that happens. There's different versions in the Babylonian Talmud and in the Jerusalem Talmud. And what we began to explore last time was how the cultural differences of Babylon and Jerusalem and the culture of the study culture of the Beit Midrash may have lent itself to these later editors who are imagining what this early rabbi said. Eileen. No, it's not. It was a different prayer. I know, because you keep asking these questions about cake. No, because we got we're like the Talmud. It's like we're not getting, we're going slowly, but that's okay. Yeah, but that's the thing with the Talmud. Some people look at the Talmud and say you're not going anywhere, and some people say, wow, you're getting everywhere. Like, what is the point of Talmudic study? So then you would be better served by reading halakha and not studying Talmud. Or there are people who'd say, if we lose the rigor in the debate, then what's the point of the halakha of the Jewish law? Like, this is the Jewish voice. It's the parsing of text. It's the recognition of different interpretive lenses, of different ways of seeing things, of fine-tuning your mind to think critically, critical thinking and analysis. That's all represented in the Gemara. And so it is a headache. That's why when I study, I take this podcast I study this podcast. I get podcasts. I try and listen to this one in Hebrew. Here, like this is a news podcast, but on why Hamas, lama Hamas rotzeh l'shachrer et Barghouti. Anyway, that's a different thing. But I listened to this podcast. Here, I was listening to this episode. But all right, there's an English version of this too. Maybe I'll bring in the English version next time, just so you can, for 2 minutes, just to listen to like what a Talmud lecture is like. So she's a remarkable woman. It's this woman named Michelle Farber rather. Michelle Farber is originally an American, now lives in Jerusalem, and she was upset that this Daf Yomi cycle, so people study Daf Yomi, and then at the end of 7 years, they have this big, like celebration of completion. It's called the Siyum. She's like, but it's not really accessible to women. Right. So what she did is she started studying at her dining room table every morning with a group of women, and she'd invite them over every morning to her house. Then all this technology. So she started putting it out in a podcast. And so every day it goes, zoop, zoop, and she does the class both in Hebrew and in English. She does it twice. Every day. Every day. And like she makes 2 of them for Shabbat so that they can, I'm not sure how she does it, but she doesn't. And so she does this every day. And she's been doing it she did a complete cycle. She's in her 2nd cycle, I think. And she gives it. Now, it's incredible, but when I'm studying, I'm like, oh, I really want to understand that more. Why does Lois want to use glass? And why does Lana want to use metal? And I want to look up what's the law. And she's going so fast, like you don't have time for that in Daf Yomi when you're studying through Daf Yomi. I like slowing it down. Anyway, we did a lot today, or maybe we did nothing. Maybe we baked a cake, maybe we didn't. I have no idea. Go ahead, Susie. Yeah, so the Gemara probably came in like the 4th or 5th century. So it's a few hundred years later that it's codified. But it's codified in different ways. And you'll see next time, the way that the Jerusalem Talmud, which is codified earlier, is much more succinct. The Babylonian Talmud, they took more time to make or to edit, and you can feel the editor's hand it's more present. The editor's hand, the editorial remarks, what's like the comments between the comments, just what's called like the anonymous comments. But it's a little later, so 4th or 5th century. Yeah. That's after. So then Tosafot is. Yeah. So Tosafot, where Rashi makes things easier. Now I'm going to add one more layer. There's another commentator on this side of the page called the Tosafot, which are Rashi's grandchildren. And where Rashi tries to make your life easier as a study aid, Tosafot tries to complicate your life with a difficulty, more difficulties. So like Tosafot will say, wait a second. Who said? Eileen said 350 degrees for bun cake in Mesechet, in the tractate of cake. But wait a second. On the tractate of Pesachim, Pesach, Eileen is quoted as saying, only make your Pesach chocolate cake at 350 degrees. So why did she say here only bun cake? Why didn't she make in consideration Pesach cake over there? So it just don't worry about Tosafot. It makes the examples. It complicates the situation even more. If you want more, if you're not complicated enough here, it makes it even further complicated. It's intertextual is the best way of describing it. It'll often ask you to compare a text from what you're studying with a different Talmudic text and try and understand how both can exist at the same time. That's generally what the Tosafot does. Okay, so I've said a lot and I've said a little, and we continue to go onward or go backwards, depending on your perspective. But anyway, I hope that you enjoyed today's session, and I will see everybody next week. Chag Purim Sameach, have a happy Purim. And God willing, we will see you here for Purim. And if not Purim, Shabbat, or if not, and then next week. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Sorry, I got to run. I got a meeting. I'm going to run out. So I don't mean to be rude, but I got to run.
Okay, all right. She just gave me the recipe for a